I pick up my life and take it away on a one-way ticket. Gone up north, gone out west, gone. Reconstruction, an era when the post-slavery society established rights for the freed African Americans, had come to an end 50 years ago. Yet many of these Southerners still searched for relief from low wages and discriminatory Jim Crow laws. In the midst of World War I, the Northern economy boomed and new industrial job opportunities opened for these families. This initiated what is now known as the First Great Migration, a time of hope and change. Jacob Lawrence's migration series successfully communicated his story on the exodus of Black Southerners from 1916 to 1930 by incorporating unique style and meaning. Growing up in the Promised Land, Lawrence developed a motive to educate through his contemporary art, and in turn was able to give a voice to the migrants that fled the South. The Stained Paintbrush. Jacob Lawrence was born in Atlantic City, New Jersey on September 7, 1917. At the age of 13, Lawrence and his family moved to Harlem, New York. It was the Harlem Renaissance, a golden era of African American culture with social and artistic explosion. In such a vital time, young Lawrence was given the opportunity to join an after-school art class at the Utopia Children's Center. Here, he met his mentor, Charles Alston, who taught him more about producing art, as well as their past ancestors. However, Lawrence's interest in the Great Migration blossomed because he witnessed Southern families settling into their new homes and heard their eye-opening stories. With the fusion of his personal experiences in both art and history, the creation of the migration series became almost inevitable. The journey of the series began in 1940 after Lawrence's idea of using art to showcase the lives of the migrants was accepted and funded by the Rosenwald Foundation. His work began as just text on cardboard, mere captions that were meant to guide the entire story. Yet after his paintings were finished with earthy shades of water-based tempera, the simple words meant so much more. The structure of the panels became undoubtedly unique as it relied on these captions to explain and provide contextual meaning to the symbolic art. Panel number 17 can aid in exploring this idea even further. The sharecroppers, hunched over by the weight of the sack, gaze earnestly at the landowner. The caption for the panel adds, "Tenant farmers received harsh treatment at the hands of planters." Pieced together, the art and the text allow for a meaningful connection to not only what is going on in the painting, but also a reason to leave the South during the First Great Migration. This panel allowed for the Northerners to see that the people of the South didn't get proper freedom. They had to work for someone else that didn't truly care for them. It is also highly likely that the panel improved the sense of community and acceptance among long-term Northerners and the newcomers as they began to understand what life was like in the South. This is not only true with this particular panel, but also when zooming out to view the entire series.
Although there are 60 panels, I really feel that I'm dealing with one, and that is why I developed the work as I did.
One story with one unified theme of hopeful movement. The series involved many figurative indications that can be noted almost unconsciously. There is an immediate feeling of relocation with the repeated symbols of leaving hastily on trains and with suitcases. Within them are metaphors of hope and the passage to a new life, with the sudden use of bright color when showing young children. This easy-to-grasp concept allows the viewer to put feelings with the series and themselves in the shoes of a migrant from that time. But was the story he created truly accurate?
Lawrence is replicating a sense of reality that is actually not necessarily accurate.
Jacob Lawrence had been born and raised in a northern city and had never experienced much of the South. During an interview, he recalls, "I was far removed from the culture I knew." With such a distant understanding of the Southern people, Lawrence was influenced to stain his paintbrush with stereotypes of the North. Lawrence tended to categorize all migrants from the South as sharecroppers. Although it is true that 55% of the Southern Black American population took part in agriculture, not all of them worked as a sharecropper. Some families bought and owned acres of farmland for themselves. According to an account from the Negro in Chicago, an African American family from a southern city in Alabama owned an 8-acre farm, a 4-room house, and raised hogs, chickens, and cows. They worked hard and saved $2,000. When the migration fever struck, they sold their property, drew out their $2,000, and followed the crowd. The family had the opportunity to own a farm and save money of their own. They were not a sharecropper or necessarily poor, but they did take part in the migration. Yet the story that Lawrence paints would create a misconception among the Northerners and make them believe in a false sense of Southern society. Dr. Stephen Reich says,
You have to judge the panel series based on what he was trying to do, what his objectives were. And I think in that spirit, he's not a historian.
Historical accuracy wasn't Lawrence's point, but rather, he was a man who willingly used storytelling elements to teach the viewers about his migrant parents and peers. The stark distinction between the urban North and the barren South allowed viewers to create a collective memory of the story. This fact is what brings the purpose of his communication to the forefront. He hoped to educate the Northerners on the poor conditions of the South to explain why the Black people fled to the Promised Land. While doing so, he also created powerful connections with the migrants themselves. Even though some may have kept their own land, they knew relatives that were sharecroppers. Others could have been a sharecropper earlier in their life, just like David Driscoll, who explains his personal ties to this story.
We bought 13 acres of land, we had our little farm, we grew our food and so forth. But there's so many episodes in this series that coincide with what I, as a child, knew. When I came upon this for the very first time, I felt very much at home looking at those images because I had lived some of them.
By creating an easy-to-relate-with reality, the series was suitable for many then and now. Jacob Lawrence passed away on June 9, 2000. Yet today, his artwork, over 80 years later, is still relevant and can emulate the years of awoken social injustice that we are currently living in. Jacqueline Lawton, an advocate for diversity and inclusion in American theater, recounts his long-lasting influence.
His panel taught us that before we ever had a hashtag, that Black Lives Do Matter. At every social strata, whether they're lower working class or the very wealthy elite, our lives matter, they're significant, they're important. They deserve to be on the walls of amazing art galleries, you know. So that's what I think that his panels have to teach us all around the world about who we are.
Jacob Lawrence was a successful educator that used a contemporary and abstract approach to the structure and meaning to communicate experiences of the first Great Migration. In spite of the fact that his paintbrush may seem stained, he was able to connect with the Southern migrants. Even to this moment, his art stands with the strong racial justice movements and will continue to represent a key point in Black history for future generations.